Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 322. Today's topic, a very long night.
Or nights.
Like of the round table?
No. With the N. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, I am the son of Michael's computer. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I am the user of a seppuku laptop, Michael Miller. We started to...
I thought you were going to say you're the moon of the show.
No. I started...
That would have been funnier.
I tried to start up the session today, and when it made a connection to Jeff through Zoom, my computer had a mini meltdown and crashed hard. And Jeff proceeded to text me saying, I have it right here. He said, your connection flew too close to me and burned. And I said, I think my connection chose seppuku over being with you. So we've been arguing over Jeff being the sun and my computer being suicidal.
Or both.
Or both.
Maybe it's a little both. I'm going to fly closer till I'm done.
So Jeff and I just spent about 40 minutes before starting the show, getting our frustrations out about COVID. I hope everybody is safe and social distancing and healthy. There really is a lot of awful things going on right now. And the only thing that I can really put out there for you guys is to remember to be kind and understanding to each other. And be what I'm running into a lot is people not social distancing and not realizing that they're making others uncomfortable by doing so and putting people at risk. I am out in the public working because, our state is locked down except for essential workers, and I qualify as an essential worker. So I'm still working, and I am working. I'm going in and out of and doing service work in grocery stores. And what happens to me all the time is people will walk right up to me. And yesterday, a guy just straight up touched me. To get to the product that they want to purchase because I am working on a piece of equipment and I am effectively in their way. And
he touched you. Yeah.
He came right up. The thing is, like, I'm in a cooler. I'm doing work in a cooler, and there's a fan in there. It's loud. So when I've got my head and my hands up close up in the cooler, I can't hear what's going on right behind me unless you're loud. And this guy came right up behind me and put his hand on my back. He's like, "Oh, excuse me, I just want to grab a pizza." And he reached over. I'm like, he's right next to me. He put his hand on my back. And I'm like, I literally could not think of anything to say. I just, because all of this happened in the matter of like a second, a second or two, and then he stepped away. But I'm just like, I want to be I could not, my professionalism and, my courtesy being at work, like I want to be like, get away from me. Like,
you had only pure Michael statements coming through you at that moment.
Yes, exactly. So, I want to ask that everybody be mindful, like just because you feel comfortable and you're, maybe with 100% certainty that you're healthy and you are no risk at all. Everyone else doesn't know that. So,
and the person you're touching might not be as well too,
Yeah. And for my thing is like, I hate to admit how much I am being reactive, and I'm more worried about this than I'd like to admit. And I notice that only because of my reactions. Like if somebody gets close to me or someone touches me and I'm out in the public, it's like, just respect that I don't want that. Respect that nobody wants that right now. Like let's all just be respectful and we'll all get through this, but we all have to give. We all have to give a little here.
Well, and the interesting thing is, like, Chris and I have always been a little mindful of cold type symptoms. Cancer has what they call B symptoms, and it's like night flashes and like hot flashes typically at night, and kind of like cold type of symptoms you can get from when you have cancer. and so whenever Kristen would kind of get a sniffle, especially the closer it was to the incident of cancer, after she was cleared, we would both kind of freeze up a little bit, and because there's always kind of like a little worry, but I've noticed since we're going on over a month, since in the U.S. has started really kind of starting to respond, at least in the part where we live, which is just maybe 2 hours, an hour and a half outside of New York City. We if I hear my friends, I use Voxer a lot with some of my friends and business associates, and like if they sniffle in it, I worry. If I hear Kristen, or if Kristen hears me sniffle, it's like, do you feel okay? Are you fine? But there's like extra paranoia, and not in a negative way. It's not like she's going to burn me at the stake if she thought I had COVID.
I mean, she's been trying to do that for years, but prior to COVID,
she knows it doesn't work.
Still hasn't worked.
I'm too hot to burn because I'm the sun.
Because you are the sun.
But yeah, it's interesting, and but I hope everyone's doing well. I hope where you live, you can feel like we're foolishly overreacting because it's not hit your community, and I hope the doctors are wrong and it won't. So,
I'm
looking. Stay safe. Yep.
I'm looking forward to returning to handshakes and hugs, but right now,
let's try and keep it.
Let's keep away from each other with loving distance, loving, respectful distance, and caring and compassion. But let's try to quell that curve.
And enough of that for this episode. We're going to get into the BS portion.
All right.
And
what are we talking about today? What are you talking about? Very long night.
Okay, so it's this idea, and I think back in 310 we talked a little bit about some of the predicate of the story, where like the father was going to send the kid off to protect him from the story. So for those of you, I
am so confused.
I know. Let's do a quick little sum up here. So back in episode 268, we started talking about this new indie game that I was thinking about. And then in episode 310, we started like talking about the story structure for it.
Yes. Okay.
And so, and in this episode, I want to focus on creating a story of I like to break down stories into a few elements: the before the story, the BS, the incident, the thing that changes the way life was, the strike, the inevitable fail that has to happen in any story, the fallout from the strike, the run, and the after the story. And you can kind of repeat some of those elements. And I always talk about that you can kind of repeat and interchange them and reutilize the entire structure within it. And so I want to focus today on creating a story for the before the story. And I'm going to make it a longer form, so it's going to repeat that same structure, but it's going to be just focused on really what the BS, and it kind of through the incident is where it ends. Sort of the first act of a 3-act story, or the first maybe part or 2 parts of a 5-act structure. Because for me, you don't always need to go through the before story and after story. But if you're looking to lengthen something, it's good to do. It's good to have some resolutions happening throughout a longer story, so you don't have 10,000 threads that you have to all wrap up or leave leave open at the end. Because most people don't like any major threads unresolved or unmentioned, even though sometimes storytellers do choose to do that.
Certainly a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, and sometimes storytellers do choose to do that, and sometimes it works. But in general, you want to always tie up your story threads. And there will always be ones that you don't have the time to. Like, there was the incident at the Miller's house, 3 years ago, and it gets mentioned in a scene and never talked about again. So you always have these things that will kind of hang out there, but they're small details that you added in. But once you start making it into a story.
And let me say one thing about that is something that you may not ever be able to predict either. This is just a quick aside. I find it funny and interesting when you might be creating something that's just a small throwaway point, maybe a world building thing for your story. You're just mentioning something. So for you, it's just a detail. But you might have a reader or a player or whatever who really keys in on that detail and just really fixates on it. They like love that detail. They're like, they really want more of that. And you're just like, I created nothing more for that. That was just a throwaway thing. And then that becomes something that needs more lore based on your fan base.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because like the entire stories that I'm doing now are based off of that. Where so you'll remember this, but I'm gonna
explain this, because I actually wasn't even referencing that, but it's literally the exact thing I'm talking about.
But it was like years ago, I was effing around on Tripod, and I was just kind of throwing some stuff up there so my gamers would have a place to go look up stuff. And this was like in my my Gardul 1.0 phase, and so it was just the static site, and I had a timeline. And someone commented on my timeline because there was just William the Postulate, conquers the island was an item in the timeline, and this island of Narnork, I think is what it was called at the time. And he was a conqueror early on in the kingdom of what I used to call Stormhold, which is what Grambatus is.
I was about to say this is Grambatus.
Yep. And he was like a famous earlier conqueror who was actually in history's mind, he was someone who was kind of for the people. And he was called the Postulate because he was renowned for his humility. And someone just commented, "Do you have some like stories about this William the Postulate? Sounds cool." And I had no idea. It was just me filling in text to have sort of like historical sounding tidbits of things in a timeline on a website that I would have been surprised if maybe 24 people ever visited, especially if you took me out of it. So it's just one of those funny things where like, all of these stories I've kind of come up with and they're second nature in my mind now. A lot of them were based just from someone asking me off of a comment. So it's funny how things work. And the cool thing is like, if you ever want to explore something like that catches people as popular mind, you can. There's a risk in doing that though. When you have things left to people's imagination, when you fill in those details, and this is one of my problems with like the second trilogy of the Star Wars stories. When you go back and do a prequel, and you start filling in the dots of how things came about, you sometimes ruin the imagination and the stories that people have created for themselves, which is why, like I argued in the last couple episodes, you can never please the people when you finished off Star Wars. The problem is at that point, there's so many details that have been worked out. There's so much stuff going on that people have taken up and they have their own opinion of what should have happened or what did happen. And every time you fill in those blanks, you're going to annoy people who you disagree with. So sometimes it's good to leave certain things to the but there's certain things that are always good to leave to the imagination. You don't need a DNA test to prove that Darth Vader is Luke's father. The fact that he said it was enough.
My bit on this one is explaining Wolverine's backstory. I would be happy never knowing that.
Yes.
Now we know it, and I feel like the character is just not as cool. It's cheapened him because now we know exactly where he came from and what happened, and it's like, but it was so much cooler that it was always a mystery.
And there's sometimes you do see stuff though where you really enjoy the way they explain it, and you think it's awesome. And so I can't say it never works, but it's good to have those kinds of moments. And so when I'm thinking about like this game story and the story of essentially it's the idea of the vengeful son coming home and retaking what is his, right? And the story the players make is how they do that. So, what the players will fill in some of the details of the choices the player makes to do that. But so some of the backstory, one has to give context to the world and the setting. And I need more there, so it has to be a little bit of storytelling there. And it can't just be a quick aside, a quick conversation dealing with it. I need some actual character time, over the realm. So there are going to be some characters that are needed for this scene, and it will probably be. I'm envisioning it being at least a couple scenes, within there, and then the players making some choices along the way. So, but it's going to follow. If you go back to episode, it was in the early 300s. The story basics. It's gonna follow the same structure as the overall story, but it's really gonna be the before the story and lead up to the incident, which begins the real journey of the hero. We'll say, hero. Which will be the default name, I'm sure. When I make the game, the default name will be Hero, just because so many. Michael's laughing because so many like Japanimation games, that's like the default name when you step in. So
yeah, the old school ones.
The old school ones, yeah. And
welcome, Hero.
That's right. And so this is the before the story. This is the point where the father makes the decision to send his kid off. And so one of the things I want to do is I need to establish why this kid is important. More so, he's the son of a count, if you think in terms of English nobility, which in the scale of the world at the time, I mean, ignoring the 95% of people who are peasants or less, and the 5% of the nobility that rule the country, they're not the bottom, but they're like the middle class, right? They're like the majority of the nobles, are going to be like landed knights or counts or barons, and so that's kind of your low end, and then you start getting into like vice counts and your dukes and your archdukes and all of that stuff. But a count is an important thing, but it's not like this overwhelming. It's not like being the king where everyone's out for your throne. So why is this I need to establish why this hero's or county is even considered important by the people above him. There's like essentially an emperor, a great Khan, and a Khan who are over him, we'll say, since they're a nomadic people. So you have like these like really great, much more powerful people all kind of looking down and watching this kid. Why would they do that? So I kind of need to address that in the before the story. And why is he vengeful at the time? And the idea is this incident leads up to a rebellion where a human kingdom is born. From this very spot, not everyone can claim to be king. Even there's really weird rules that the nobility at least follow, and the peasants, I think, in general, just kind of if you're the guy there, you're probably the lesser of two evils, I'm sure, unless you really suck. But it's like if you speak the same, they're not going to think much about you. Just as another lord there to take their hard-earned labor. So kind of like today. And but so the idea is but where does this idea of the new kingdom come out of? And and if you know the lore of my world, the kingdom of Grimbatus has no king, and that's a huge part of the kingdom. That is a huge thing. So that's something I wanted to give the ability for the player to address in the story as well too. But I need some background of why. And so for someone stepping into the game, they kind of need to know that the idea of a king isn't necessarily good, won't be appreciated by his people. And I need to kind of reinforce that in the beginning story too. So I have a couple important things I need to accomplish, which is why it's going to take a couple scenes and set up some of the possible avenues the player can take going forward in the story. Okay, well, there we go. There's this week's episode. But no, not really. But I mean, understanding the background and what I'm trying to accomplish, I think, is important, because I think a lot of times when you struggle in writing, it's because you have no reason for writing what you're writing. You're trying to get some words onto a page, and that can make it very difficult to write a story, and maybe even if you have the overall arching story, sometimes you have to think out moments and so then go, why is this moment important? And if I was going to be writing a novel, this would be sort of a chapter outlines for like the first third of the book. I kind of like 3-act structures, probably because I watch too many movies and television. I'm used to that flow. I understand it. That those 5 acts are just 2 acts too many for me. But the idea is, and once I get in the story, it's like some of the subplots and stuff like that. Their backstory will be from the actual story and the adventure that's happening. But especially for the beginning, I need to set up a few things. Like, one, this kid is related to the last king of what was called the Kingdom of Bedracus. And so I need to establish that, because the people who come into the video game, they're not going to know that. Let's be honest, most people don't know crap about my world. Even a lot of my players would not realize that there was a king of Bedracus whose like great grandson or grandson ended up starting the Kingdom of Grabatus. It was never important. I'd imagine most of the players didn't even realize that there were 2 separate entities, and so because it's never come up, they know that the orcs are hated, but they might not even know why, because if you're playing in the future, the reason why you hate the orcs is maybe not as important as hating the orcs. So
and you just hate them. You don't even know why.
They're freaking orcs.
They're orcs. I mean, come on.
You've been, it's like, why did the French and the English hate each other in the 18th century? Well, it goes back to, the Duke of Normandy becoming the King of England. But at the time in the 18th century, 700 years later, that was unimportant. It was just that, we're invading France again, or France is going to try and invade us again. So that's just the way it goes. So we know a little bit about what we know. We know we're going to need characters. The hero's going to be involved. And I think I mentioned this in the previous episode, was the idea of the father is ushering him out of the country with his mother. And so the story, I think, has to start around that. That's going to be what we would call the incident, that moment where the father puts him on the boat to leave. That's going to be the incident that begins the story before the story of the way this kid's life was leading up to when the story of the game really begins. And so the idea is at that moment where, you need some moments with the father, you're probably going to need a scene with the father and the mother to establish their relationship. The mother was chosen. She's related to the Emperor of Shiftar. And she was married to this count, which is another reason why the Duke and the essentially the Khan and the Great Khan are kind of paying attention, because this guy's married to a relative, not a close relative, but a relative of the Emperor of Shiftar. And so they're watching to make sure that this guy isn't making any moves, because they also know he's related to the old king. The Khan wants his land.
All bad things.
All bad things for the current rulers.
The current regime, yeah.
You don't want someone with what you would call a claim to the throne trying to reclaim his throne, and especially with the acting of a foreign power. And typically nobles greatly have the ability of coveting land and wealth. This land is actually somewhat wealthy. There are tin deposits, which for people...
I'm sorry, did you say tin?
Tin, yes.
Tin. And the big thing about tin is you need tin to process... Bronze, I knew it.
And now this is an Iron Age civilization, sort of an early Iron Age civilization. Bronze is still very important. It's a very pretty metal. It's not used in weapons anymore, but it's used in many status items. And the thing is, it's because tin is rare. And I'm keeping that idea in Gardul as it is on Earth. Copper, the other part of it.
Tin's not rare on Earth, right?
Tin is rare.
On Earth?
On Earth.
Really?
We're better at finding it and extracting it today, but at ancient times, there were very few places you could get tin from.
Well, ancient times, fair enough, but yeah. I imagine a lot of things were very difficult to process and harvest.
But tin is more like gold than it's like iron. Iron's very abundant. Mm-hmm. You can literally take Earth in many places, and if you kind of work it, you might be able to get a little bit of iron out of it. But tin was rare, and even on Earth, many powerful early civilizations had access to tin. In the Bronze Age, you needed access to tin with either gold, because gold was also a rare metal, but you need that to make bronze. And I don't think tin is as rare as gold, but it's still rare because one, it's a heavier thing, so naturally it sinks. So in the core, all of Earth's tin is closer to the core than the surface. So the tin and most of the metal deposits we get on Earth are from asteroids that have impacted Earth since the crust formed. And that's what keeps the crust on top.
Your crust,
or the heavier metals on top. We're all floating. But I'm getting way off on a tangent here, so I'm going to stop. But the idea is tin is a rare thing. They have copper. They have iron deposits as well. They have lots of mining. This is an area, it's literally, it's like, think about like you're in the Alps or you're in the Himalayas in a valley, much closer to the surface, much closer to sea level. But around you have these very harsh, like Andes style mountains, very tall, very jagged, not at all good to move things through. That surround about 3/4 of it, and then the rest of it is kind of surrounded by sort of more broken mountain-esque type of features where it's worn down a lot more than the big hard mountains that surround most of it. But that's where not lots of sun, a lot of times of the year doesn't make it here very well. So they have a very defined growing season, and they need the conditions to be good during that time. But if they do, they get all of their own food, plus they have the metal to generate wealth through trade to make up when times are lean. And so the idea is the Duke is sitting here going, well, this guy, if he was to die with no kids, maybe the Duke would inherit his lands. And
so, of course, that's his plan.
That's his plan, and the father, not being stupid, has decided to send his kid off, and he's going to send him off with his mother, because if his mother dies, the connection to Shiftar goes, and there's a huge threat there. Like if you act too openly, you're not only attacking me, you're indirectly causing offense to a very powerful person in a different country. So it helps keep you alive as well, too. So they have a son, which is a legitimate heir. He sends the heir and the mother away back to Shiftar to protect them, with the intent that the son will come back to rule the land. And,
hooray!
Yes. So that will kind of lead up. That's kind of the before the story, but that's the part too where you need conversations and evidence to talk about the grandfather, or I might make him the great grandfather. I forget what the actual time frame is. I'll have to double check that before I officialize it. But was the last king of Pedrakis, which in theory gives this kid a claim on the Pedrakan lands and all of the other tribes that are there. Because remember, it's the dirge of the 7 tribes. He is connected to the Pedrakam tribe, which is sort of one of the more dominant tribes, but because of his connection to the Old Kingdom, in theory, is in charge of those tribes by blood.
Would those tribes accept him?
Would that be fun? Yes or no? At this point,
you haven't decided that yet.
Well, that's the story will be him bringing the tribes together one way or another. So that's the story of the game.
Together because I'm in charge of you.
That's right. Because if and then those will give you choices later on. Do I use force to submit?
I was about to say you and what army? That was my next statement.
Yes. So as a count, he'll have money for troops, and he can use those troops to help subjugate. And in theory, you have elements of the all of the rebels. When the last king surrendered, it was in the same valley. He was given the county as his new land, as being twice removed from the emperor, You know, in a way, it was the emperor trying to put the guy in his place so everyone could see, I don't have to kill this guy. He's now in this far off land surrounded by mountains. You know, he's just a servant of one of my servants. That's how powerful I, as the new emperor, are. You know, so that's
how powerful I are.
That's how powerful I are. He's an orc.
Okay,
and English is not his first language.
Fair enough.
But you know, so it was the emperor's propaganda that probably kept him from being killed. But it was a desire to not have to fight here. You know, the problem is by the time he had to fight here in the middle of his lands, he's already having problems with the Shiftarians. He's having problems with his other neighbors. He wants to move on to the next thing. So instead of either a long siege or losing a lot of troops here, he could strike a deal with the grandfather. I'll make you a count. You keep the lands here, and all your rebel army, you know, will be broken up. So there are elements of all of the 7 tribes right here in this one little remote county. But they were actually remnants of the actual old king's army. And so there's still some of that structure there. And technically they are vassaled to the count in this county. Whether or not that ever extends beyond the county, that's a story of a different day. And whether or not this new count can exert authority over them to do what he wants to is the actual main story of the game. You know, so in theory, yes, he has the control. You know, having a claim and being able to exercise it are two different things. And history has pointed that out as well, too. So thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.